When Diane Keaton passed away on October 11, 2025, a strange quiet fell over Hollywood. For half a century, she had been the voice of laughter, chaos, and charm, a woman who turned clumsiness into art and solitude into poetry. Yet that morning, the house that had once echoed with her wit and wild ideas became still. The woman who taught the world that love could be awkward and still beautiful was gone. For millions of fans, it was the end of an era. For Keanu Reeves, it was something much more intimate, the end of a love that had never found its ending. He didn't post on social media. He didn't attend public tributes. But those who knew him said his grief was unmistakable. Keanu had always been a man who carried his pain quietly, as though it were a secret language only he could understand. But on October 18, a week after Diane's passing, the silence finally broke. At a small film premiere in New York, the cameras were rolling when Keanu stepped onto the stage. His usual calm, polite smile was gone. The room felt different, heavy, expectant, as if everyone sensed he was about to say something important. Holding the microphone with trembling hands, he spoke only a few words. Diane was the light I didn't deserve, and I'll regret forever that I didn't tell her sooner how much she meant to me. There was no music, no applause, only the sound of people quietly crying. That single sentence spread across the internet within minutes. Headlines called it Keanu Reeves' final confession. For years, rumors had whispered about a secret romance between the two, an affection born on the set of Something's Got to Give, the 2003 film that had paired them as unlikely lovers. But Keanu's confession confirmed what fans had long suspected: their connection had been real. After the premiere, Keanu slipped away from the press. Witnesses said he walked alone through the cold Manhattan streets, hands in his pockets, head down, as if trying to hide from the world. He stopped briefly near a small cafe, looked through the window, and smiled faintly. It was the same cafe where he and Diane had once met during filming to read lines together. Back when everything was simpler, before the weight of time and fear had torn them apart. Later that evening, he sent a short handwritten note to one of Diane's closest friends, who shared it privately with reporters. The note read, "She taught me to see love in everything, in mistakes, in silence, even in loneliness. I hope she knows that now." Those words captured what made their story so heartbreaking. It wasn't a grand romance filled with scandals or public declarations. It was quiet. It lived in glances across film sets, in the way they made each other laugh, in late-night drives down the Pacific Coast Highway when the city was asleep and only the ocean could hear their conversations. When Keanu finally spoke that night in New York, it wasn't a statement for the world, it was a whisper meant for her. "Diane," he said, voice breaking, "thank you for loving me when I was too broken to love myself." For a man who had already buried so many loved ones, a child, a partner, close friends, losing Diane wasn't just another loss. It was the loss of a soul who had understood his silence and spoken his language of pain. That evening, he returned to his hotel, avoiding cameras, but one photographer, standing far away, captured a single image that went viral the next morning. Keanu sitting by a window, head resting against the glass, his reflection blurred by raindrops. In his hand, he held a folded photo, Diane, smiling in her signature hat, eyes bright as if frozen in eternal youth. No caption was needed. The picture said everything. Hollywood had lost a legend. Keanu had lost his quiet miracle. And somewhere, in that boundless space between grief and memory, a man who had spent his life running from the past found himself whispering into the dark. "Goodbye, my friend, my love, my Diane." Their story began not with fireworks, but with laughter. It was the autumn of 2002. And the air on the Los Angeles set of Something's Got to Give carried that strange mixture of anticipation and exhaustion unique to movie production. Diane Keaton, at 56, was already a living legend, sharp, radiant, and gloriously unpredictable. Keanu Reeves, at 38, was the quiet newcomer to her world, reserved, gentle, his every smile carrying a hint of melancholy. From the first day they met, something changed in the rhythm of the set. Crew members noticed how Diane teased him relentlessly, calling him Dr. Too Handsome, in reference to his role in the film. He would blush, stammer, and smile, unable to hide his awkward delight. Between takes, they would talk about architecture, books, and music, the kind of conversations that leave echoes long after they end. At first, it was all play. When asked in an interview about their on-screen chemistry, Diane joked, "Kissing Keanu was like kissing my own son, if my son looked like a Greek god." The audience laughed, but behind that humor was an affection that words couldn't fully conceal. For Keanu, who was still recovering from the heavy grief of losing his partner Jennifer Syme and their unborn daughter, Diane's energy felt like sunlight breaking through years of gray. Filming wrapped, but their story didn't. The press caught glimpses of them driving together down Pacific Coast Highway, the ocean shimmering beside them. In those moments, there were no cameras, no scripts, just two souls learning to breathe again. Diane would sing old Beatles songs, her voice imperfect but full of joy, while Keanu watched her with quiet admiration. "She made me laugh," he later said in a rare interview. "And I hadn't really laughed in a long time." They met often in those months: dinners, coffee at Venice Beach, long walks without bodyguards or glamour. Diane had known passion before: Woody Allen's intellectual charm, Warren Beatty's wild magnetism, Al Pacino's devastating silence. But Keanu brought something entirely different. He didn't chase her, didn't try to impress her. He simply listened. For a woman who had built her life around self-reliance and humor, that silence felt like home. She once told a friend, "He doesn't talk much, but when he looks at you, you feel seen, really seen." Still, love is never as simple as the movies teach us. Diane carried the scars of her past, heartbreaks that had left her wary of promises. And Keanu, haunted by loss, lived as if any new love might vanish without warning. He confessed once during a late-night drive, "I'm afraid of what comes after love, the part where it disappears." Diane reached for his hand. "Then maybe," she whispered, "we just love, and let it stay beautiful for as long as it can." But fate is rarely kind to gentle hearts. Their connection, though profound, was built on two wounded souls walking in parallel lines. They were too different, too cautious, too afraid of hurting what they cherished. By early 2005, their quiet romance had started to fade. On their final morning together, they met at a small cafe near the ocean. The same table, the same coffee cups, but the warmth between them had dimmed. Keanu couldn't meet her eyes. Diane, always braver in love, smiled through the ache. "You don't have to be strong, Keanu, you just have to be here," she said softly. He shook his head. "You deserve someone whole. I'm still learning how to breathe." They parted with a long embrace, not goodbye, but the kind of farewell that promises to linger. For years after, Diane would tell friends that he was the kindest heartbreak she ever had. And Keanu? He never spoke of it publicly. But he kept a single photograph from the set, Diane laughing under the California sun, her hat tilted, her eyes glimmering with mischief. He carried it with him on every film set that followed. To the world, it was just another Hollywood rumor. But to him, it was a love that never really ended, only changed form. Living on quietly in the corners of his memory by the time Diane Keaton took her final bow in October 2025. The world was already preparing to celebrate another season of awards and premieres. Yet for Keanu Reeves, all the glamour of Hollywood felt meaningless. Her passing reopened a wound he thought had scarred over long ago, the kind that never fully closes because it was carved by something too pure to forget. For years after their quiet separation, Keanu had carried her memory like a fragile secret. He never spoke of her in interviews, never confirmed the rumors, but he also never denied them. When journalists asked about love, he would only smile softly and say, "Love never really leaves you. It just changes shape." Those who knew him best understood exactly who he was talking about. They remained friends, polite, careful, respectful, but their friendship was heavy with the silence of all that had once been unsaid. In 2020, at the Academy Awards, fate placed them on the same carpet again. The cameras flashed as Diane, radiant in her signature white suit, turned and found Keanu standing only a few feet away. He bowed slightly. She laughed, that same mischievous laugh that could make a room come alive, and for a moment, the years melted away. Later that night, during an after-party, someone saw them sitting together in a quiet corner, away from the music and champagne. They weren't flirting, they weren't reminiscing, They were just being. Two souls who didn't need to explain the meaning of their silence. Then, 5 years later, she was gone. The morning Keanu learned the news, he didn't speak. He simply turned off his phone and disappeared from public view. Friends said he spent the day walking through Central Park, alone, stopping occasionally to sit on a bench and stare at the falling leaves. One witness said he seemed to whisper something under his breath, perhaps her name. Perhaps an apology. When he reappeared a week later at a small film premiere in New York, the world expected professionalism. Instead, what they received was confession. Standing under the dim theater lights, his voice cracked as he said, "Diane, I should have told you I loved you when I had the chance. I'm sorry for letting fear make me silent." It was not rehearsed. It was not a performance. It was a man's final attempt to speak to someone who could no longer answer. Afterward, he placed a white rose, her favorite, beside a framed portrait of her smiling on the set of Something's Got to Give. The picture had been taken on a day when the two of them had laughed so hard they ruined 3 takes in a row. Seeing it again made his eyes well with tears. "She made the world less lonely," he whispered, "and that's what real love does, even when it's gone." That night, he returned to his hotel and sat by the window, staring at the city lights. He later told a friend that he could almost hear her voice, light, teasing, warm, saying, "Don't cry for me, Keanu. You always hated endings." For the first time in years, he allowed himself to weep, not for what they had lost, but for what they had never had the courage to begin. In the days that followed, Keanu was seen visiting a quiet stretch of beach in California. Witnesses said he stood there for hours, alone, tossing small seashells into the tide, one after another, as if sending her pieces of his heart. Hollywood will remember Diane Keaton as the charming icon who made generations fall in love with imperfection. But for Keanu Reeves, she will always be something else entirely. The woman who taught him that even broken souls deserve to love and be loved in return. And though the world moves on, somewhere deep within him, she remains, eternal, unspoken, alive in every heartbeat that still dares to remember her name. "Goodbye, my queen," he would later write in a private letter never meant for the public. "You were my lesson, my laughter, and my silence, and in every quiet moment that follows, I still hear you."